I used to believe I knew the woman I was going to marry. Her laughter was the kind of sound that made crowded rooms fade into the background. Her touch felt like a promise, and her words often painted the future I thought we'd share. I was a man who carried the ring, rehearsed the vows, and trusted without hesitation. At least, that's who I thought I was, until the night everything I believed collapsed under one brutal truth. It began with a whisper, not a scream. A friend of mine, not the type to stir drama, pulled me aside with a look that made my chest tighten. "You need to know something," he said carefully. "Your fiancée was seen at a swingers party last weekend." At first, I laughed. I actually laughed, because the woman I loved, my soon-to-be wife, would never even think of something so reckless, so destructive. Or so I told myself. But denial only lasts until evidence appears. 2 nights later, I found her phone buzzing on the counter. She was in the shower. I didn't snoop out of habit. I never had a reason to. But that night, instinct dragged my eyes to the screen. A group chat, smirking emojis, details about who showed up and what fun they had. And her name threaded through the conversation, like a knife across my skin. My world stopped in that moment. I stared at those messages, reading and rereading, waiting for some explanation that would make it all vanish. Maybe she went to observe. Maybe she was dragged along. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the words were clear. She wasn't an outsider looking in. She was a participant. And suddenly, the woman I thought I knew was a stranger standing under my roof. When she walked out of the bathroom, smiling, wrapped in a towel, I felt a sickness rise in me. I wanted to confront her immediately. I wanted to demand why, how, when, but I didn't. Not yet, because anger only gives the guilty a chance to twist a narrative. Instead, I sat there in silence, memorizing betrayal written in her texts, committing every word in my heart like scars that would never fade. The next morning, I tested her. Over coffee, I asked casually, "How was your weekend again?" She answered too quickly, too easily. "Just a night in Netflix, you know." Lies. Clean, sharp practice lies. And I realized in that instant, the woman across from me wasn't just unfaithful. She was fearless about it. Bold enough to betray. Bold enough to hide it with a smile. That was the moment my love began to die. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the satisfaction of watching me break. I simply stood up, walked to the bedroom, and pulled the small box with our wedding bands from the dresser. I slipped my ring into my pocket, held hers in my palm, and looked at it one last time, a symbol that had lost its meaning before it was ever placed on her finger. Later that night, she came home to an empty apartment. On the kitchen counter, I left the ring, a folded note, and nothing more. The note read only 2 words: wedding canceled. That was it. No explanation, no second chances, no endless conversations where she would cry and beg and twist reality to make herself the victim. I wasn't giving her the stage to perform. And then I disappeared. I cut the strings, blocked her number, deleted her photos, vanished in the place where she thought she could reach me. I wasn't going to sit around collecting her apologies or watching her fight to patch up the holes she had torn in our foundation. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. For days, I wondered if I had been too harsh. But then I remembered those messages. The gleeful tone, the reckless confidence. She had made a choice to live in a world that didn't include loyalty, honesty, or respect for the man waiting at home. And in that choice, she had also chosen to end our future. The wedding wasn't the only thing I canceled. I canceled a version of myself that tolerated less than I deserved. I canceled the blind trust that made me vulnerable to lies. And I canceled the belief that love means overlooking the unforgivable. In the end, walking away wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing that the woman I thought I would marry never really existed. She was an idea, a dream, a version of herself she let me believe in, but the real her? She revealed herself in those messages. And once I saw her for who she truly was, I knew there was no wedding, no vows, no forever, only an ending. So I walked away quietly but with certainty. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting for what's broken. It's refusing to let betrayal chain you to someone who was never yours in the first place.